G'day everyone. Today, I've got a story that you're really going to want to hear. So, go on, pull up a chair and pour yourself a cuppa. My channel is all about the magic of storytelling, and I reckon we can enjoy this incredible yarn together. The hustle and bustle of Sydney felt like a dream from a distant past. Outside the window of the dusty ute Chloe Mitchell was driving. Neat rows of grapevines and rolling green hills stretched on forever. Unlike the hot, tar-scented air of the city, the air in Victoria's Yarra Valley was thick with the smell of eucalyptus and damp earth. In the passenger seat, her husband Liam glanced back at their sleeping daughter, Ruby, with a gentle smile. Curled up at Ruby's feet was the family's old patriarch, a blue heeler named Bluey, his salt and pepper coat rising and falling with each quiet breath. Are we really doing the right thing? The question slipped from Chloe's lips for what felt like the 100th time. As a team leader at a top marketing firm in the city, she'd had the salary and the status anyone would envy. She'd thrown it all away to come here, to save this place, the farm run by her father, Bruce Patterson. "We'll be right, love, you can do this," Liam said, gently squeezing her hand. His warmth was enough to slightly ease the knot of anxiety tightening in her chest. Eventually, the ute pulled up in front of a farmhouse with a faded wooden sign at the gate. The Patterson's Patch, the letters, weathered by 30 years of sun and rain, looked as stubborn and unyielding as the man himself. The welcome they received was not the warm embrace they had hoped for. Bruce stood on the porch, arms crossed over his chest, his sunburnt face a roadmap of deep wrinkles. His gaze was sharp and cold, sizing him up. "So, you're here." There was no hint of joy in his voice. "G'day, Bruce. It's been a while." "About this whole thing," Chloe began, about to launch into her well-rehearsed speech. But Bruce cut her off. "What's a city Sheila like you know about working the land?" The air froze. Chloe felt the blood drain from her face. All her pride, built from staring down corporate boards and managing multi-million-dollar projects, shattered into a million pieces. "Dad, don't be like that," Liam said protectively, but Bruce paid him no mind. He scanned Chloe from her clean boots to the top of her head and let out a cynical scoff. "Listen here, this isn't some weekend getaway. Agriculture's not some bloody game you win with your internet and your buzzwords." Every word was a barb, piercing Chloe's heart. She'd made this decision after hearing from Liam, through his tears, that the farm was on the brink of collapse. She had spent sleepless nights convinced that her skills in online marketing could save it, establishing a direct-to-consumer route that cut out the greedy middlemen. For that belief, she had sacrificed a brilliant career, but the man standing before her had just stomped all over her resolve. "I understand that. That's why I want my skills to help," she managed to choke out. Bruce turned his back on her. "All talk, you lot. We'll see. Let's see how long those clean hands of yours last." With those parting words, he stomped heavily inside the house. All that was left was an awkward silence, broken only by the sound of Ruby, who had woken up and started to cry as if sensing the tension. Chloe realized the fists she had clenched were trembling. Was it anger, humiliation, or regret? A storm of emotions churned in her gut. Was this decision really the right one? Bruce's final words echoed in her mind. "This isn't some bloody game. You city types are more trouble than you're worth." The clear blue Victorian sky suddenly seemed a dull, oppressive grey to Chloe. Her new life in the country had begun with a brutal, soul-crushing humiliation. A week passed, but the icy wall between Chloe and Bruce didn't thaw. If anything, it grew thicker. Chloe had stayed up all night finalizing her business plan. It detailed the history of the Patterson's Patch, the quality of the soil and produce Bruce had cultivated for 30 years, and a concrete online strategy to deliver it directly to customers. Surely, she thought, even the most stubborn old farmer would see the potential in this. Full of fragile hope, she presented the document to Bruce at the breakfast table. "Bruce, could you spare 5 minutes? This is my plan to get the farm back on its feet." Bruce merely glanced at the plan while sipping his steaming hot tea. He flicked past the graphs and professional terminology Chloe pointed to, as if they were worthless, before snorting in derision. "All this fancy jargon, you reckon that'll make the tomatoes grow? That's not the point. This is about..." Chloe's voice started to rise, but Liam gently squeezed her knee under the table. She reined in her frustration and tried to explain calmly. "Carefully, we can cut out the 40% commission the middlemen take. We can lower the price for customers. And the farm still makes a better profit. Using social media means almost no advertising costs. This is how it works these days." "These days?" Bruce slammed his mug down on the table with a loud crack. His eyes were as sharp as a hawk's. "What do you know about my 30 years? Getting up before sunrise, working till my back breaks, spending sleepless nights during floods and droughts. You think you can understand the weight of this soil? A young thing like you? His roar echoed through the kitchen. His face was red with anger, a vein throbbing at his temple. Farming is about sweat and hard yakka. If you could make a fortune just by tapping on a keyboard, no one would bother getting their hands dirty. It was a complete rejection of Chloe's entire life and career. She hadn't had it easy. She had fought tooth and nail in a competitive world, honing her skills, building her reputation through relentless hard work. And to Bruce, it was all just tapping on a keyboard. Bruce, Chloe is just trying to help us, Liam interjected, but Bruce's anger was a runaway train. You stay out of it. Son, this all got complicated the minute you brought this city slicker into our family. The words hit Liam hard, but they wounded Chloe even deeper. She saw tears well up in Liam's eyes. A surge of rage rose from the pit of Chloe's stomach at seeing her husband so hurt. But arguing now would only make the chasm between them wider. She bit her lip, clenching her fists, and endured the silence. That afternoon, Chloe tried to help out in the fields alone, but everything she did drew criticism from Bruce. The way she planted the seedlings was wrong. The way she watered was inefficient. He even found fault in the way she handled a shovel. To a man with decades of experience, her every move looked like the clumsy fumbling of an amateur. Dinner was consumed in a heavy, suffocating silence. Chloe felt utterly isolated in her new home. Anger, frustration, and an indescribable loneliness gnawed at her heart. Later that night, unable to sleep, she sat on the veranda when she heard Bruce and Liam arguing inside. For God's sake, Dad, just listen to what she's saying. Don't be a fool. You think some fairy tale plan on a screen can save the farm I've bled for 30 years? Bruce's roar shattered the night's quiet. Fairy tale plan. The words were the final blow, negating her very worth. Shivering on the cold wooden boards of the veranda, Chloe felt a profound sense of powerlessness. How could she ever break through this wall? Or was it even possible? In the deep darkness, Chloe wrestled with questions that had no answers. Amidst the suffocating tension, there was one source of light for Chloe: the silent, beautiful bond between her 1-year-old daughter, Ruby, and the 15-year-old blue healer, Bluey. Bluey had belonged to Bruce's late wife, Mary. He had come to the farm with her, a living reminder of her, a silent witness to the farm's entire history. In his younger days, he was a formidable working dog, but now his movements were slow and gentle, and he spent most of his days snoozing on the veranda, as if sensing the friction in the family. His amber eyes often held a look of deep sadness. The only time Bluey showed a spark of his old energy was when Ruby was near. To Ruby, the big, sturdy dog was like a gentle, protective older brother who had been there since she was born. Once, when a wobbly-legged Ruby tripped on a stone in the garden, Bluey, who had seemed fast asleep, moved like lightning. He slid under her, his thick coat cushioning her fall. Ruby just giggled, happily sprawled on his back. Bluey didn't even flinch, simply letting her use him as a pillow until she was satisfied. One sunny afternoon, with her heart raw from another argument with Bruce, Chloe sighed as she sat alone on the veranda. Just then, Ruby crawled out of the house and made a beeline for Bluey. She grabbed his ear and started swinging it back and forth. Ruby, no, be gentle, Chloe said, rushing to intervene. But Bluey just slowly lifted his head and gave Chloe a calm look. As if to say, it's all right, no worries. He let Ruby do as she pleased, then gave her small cheek a soft lick. Ruby giggled at the tickle and wrapped her arms around his thick neck in a tight hug. Watching them, Chloe felt a warm feeling spread through her chest. Between the adults, words created misunderstandings and conflict. But between the innocent child and the old dog, there was only pure trust and affection. Liam had told her stories. You know, Bluey was protecting Ruby even before she was born. He knew she was coming. He explained how, during Chloe's pregnancy visit, she had felt faint, and it was Bluey's frantic barking that alerted Bruce and got her help. Ever since she was born, whenever she gets close to something dangerous, Bluey just subtly blocks her path. Is like her guardian angel. I swear. It was true. Bluey was always watching over Ruby. If she toddled too close to the farm's dam, he would plant his body in front of her and refuse to move. If she went near the shed where sharp tools were kept, he would let out a low growl of warning. It was a bond that transcended words, a connection at the level of the soul. For Chloe, who felt like an unwelcome outsider, the peaceful world created by Ruby and Bluey was her only sanctuary. In their presence, there were no cutting remarks, no bruised pride, just an innocent life and an old soul dedicated to protecting it. Chloe gently took Ruby's small hand as she lay curled up next to Bluey. To protect this child's smile, she told herself, I can endure any humiliation. But what Chloe and her family didn't know was that a huge, silent threat was creeping ever closer to their fragile peace. As the summer sun grew stronger and the tomatoes in the greenhouse began to turn a deep red, the first sign of trouble appeared on the farm. It was during his usual early morning patrol that Bruce found something strange. Behind the greenhouse closest to the sloping bushland at the edge of the property, he discovered something truly bizarre. Lying on the ground was the massive, shed skin of a snake. And this wasn't just any snake skin. It was easily over 2 meters long, and its thickest part was as wide as a grown man's arm. It had a dull sheen, so fresh it seemed its owner had only just left it behind. Bloody hell, Bruce muttered. He'd been farming this land for over 30 years, but he'd never seen a skin this big. A diamond python? A carpet python? Whatever it was off the charts. He frowned, staring at the skin. Just then, his neighbor Kev, who was starting work in the next field, wandered over. Kev was the same age as Bruce, a veteran farmer born and raised in the valley. "G'day, Bruce. Up early, mate. Whoa, what in the blazes is that?" Kev's face soured the moment he saw the skin. "Kev, you ever seen one this big before?" Bruce asked. Kev stroked his chin, a worried look on his face. "Can't say I have, mate, but there's been some strange talk." According to Kev, a few evenings ago, he'd seen an unbelievably large snake crossing a creek at the foot of the hills. At first, he thought it was a fallen log, but then it moved with a fluid, living motion. You hear these stories, you know, city folks buy these exotic pets. Can't handle M, so they dump M in the bush. Could be one of them. You've got a little grandkid running around. Bruce, you'd want to be careful. Kev's warning planted a small seed of unease in Bruce's mind, but his decades of experience quickly dismissed it. Nah, it's just from the bush. Always been critters in these hills. Long as they don't bother us, we leave, MB. He said this and kicked the snakeskin into the long grass. Kev still looked worried, but Bruce wasn't interested in discussing it further. From that day on, however, Bluey's behavior became noticeably strange. The old dog, who usually did nothing but sleep on the veranda, began to patrol obsessively around one specific area, the greenhouse where the skin had been found. He would press his nose to the ground, sniffing and tracking something, then freeze, staring intently into the dark shadows of the bushland, a low growl rumbling deep in his throat. "What is it, boy?" Chloe would ask, but Bluey would only flick an ear, refusing to break his guard. A sharp, intense light had returned to his amber eyes. The fur along his spine stood up like bristles. It was the instinctive warning sign of an animal defending its territory from an intruder. The rest of the family dismissed Bluey's strange behavior as him just getting old and neurotic. Bruce even spat, reckoned the old fella's finally losing his marbles. 3 nights before the incident, Chloe was woken by the stuffy heat. Beside her, Liam and Ruby were breathing peacefully, getting up for a drink of water. She walked quietly out to the veranda and froze. She saw a dark silhouette standing there. It was Bluey. Bathed in the moonlight, his body was as still as a statue, staring at a single point in the garden, the deep darkness beyond the greenhouses. His fur was on end. His rigid tail quivered slightly. A suppressed but intensely hostile growl escaped his throat in short bursts. The unnerving atmosphere made Chloe swallow hard. What in the world was out there? She strained her eyes, but all she could see were the shifting shadows of trees in the wind and the deep, impenetrable blackness. But Bluey saw it. He saw the massive, cold, malicious presence slithering towards this family, towards this peaceful farm. It was the quiet prologue to a nightmare. That afternoon was so peaceful it felt like the world was holding its breath. The sky was a boundless blue, and the soft summer sun made the leaves of the trees glitter as they danced in a gentle breeze. The distant, laughing call of a kookaburra echoed through the valley. Bruce was off mowing a distant paddock, and Liam had gone into town to pick up farm supplies. Left at home, Chloe finished up the cleaning and took Ruby outside. To escape the harsh sun, she laid a blanket in the shade of a large gum tree between the house and the greenhouses. "Time for a little nap, my sweet Ruby," she whispered, lulled by a soft lullaby. Ruby was soon fast asleep. Beside her, as always, Bluey lay like a loyal guardian, smiling at the tranquil scene. Chloe went back inside to bring in the laundry. Peaceful time flowed slowly. Only Ruby's rhythmic breathing and Bluey's quiet sighs melted into the afternoon stillness. And then it happened. Bluey's ears twitched sharply. His amber eyes, which had been closed, snapped open. He lifted his head from the ground with a sudden jolt. His nostrils flared, tasting the air. The next moment, The fur all over his body stood on end, and a low, threatening growl rumbled from deep within his chest. "It's here." This was different from his usual jing-gi-ji. It carried the sound of clear and present danger. In the kitchen washing dishes, Chloe heard the unusual sound and stopped. "Bluey, what's wrong?" It was rare for the normally placid dog to get so worked up. A sense of dread washed over her as she peered out the window. Ruby was sleeping peacefully on the blanket. Bluey was right next to her. Nothing seemed out of place. And in that instant, out of the corner of her eye, from the dark shadows behind the greenhouse, something slithered into view. At first, she thought it was a thick, forgotten hose, but it wasn't. It was moving, a massive body covered in a mottled pattern of black and brown. It reflected the sunlight with a dull gleam as it moved silently, unbelievably slowly, across the ground. Chloe gasped. She felt as if her blood had turned to ice. A snake, the giant snake Kev had been talking about. No, it was far bigger than he'd described. It had to be 3 meters long, its body as thick as a grown man's thigh. It moved like something out of a nightmare, coiling and uncoiling as it advanced. And the most terrifying thing of all, it was heading straight for the blanket where Ruby was sleeping. Like a predator stalking its prey, the snake occasionally flicked its forked red tongue, closing the distance with terrifying certainty. Chloe couldn't make a sound. "I have to scream. I have to save Ruby." But her throat felt glued shut, and her body was frozen to the spot, paralyzed by pure terror. Grr! Bluey's growl erupted into a full-blown roar. He threw his body between the sleeping child and the approaching python. Every muscle tensed, radiating raw aggression. Noticing the fierce dog, the snake paused for a moment. It raised its head, its small, cold eyes staring at Bluey, and beyond him, at the sleeping Ruby, as if sizing them both up. Time seemed to stand still. Chloe's heart hammered against her ribs like a drum. Then, the next second, as if completely ignoring Bluey's threat, the python resumed its advance. It reached Ruby's side and began to wrap its cold, muscular body around her small, fragile leg. Woken by the strange sensation, Ruby looked down with a confused expression at the bizarre thing coiling around her. "Ruby!" A blood-curdling scream finally tore from Chloe's throat, echoing across the farm. Startled, Ruby's little cry of surprise turned into a muffled whimper as the snake's grip tightened. In this desperate situation, the old dog Bluey took a determined step forward. But could one old, worn-out dog really stop this living nightmare? Time seemed to stretch, filled with malice. In Chloe's vision, everything moved in slow motion. The python wrapped around Ruby's leg was slowly, but surely, tightening its grip. Ruby's face contorted from surprise to fear, and then to pain, turning a frightening shade of red. She tried to push the snake away with her tiny hands, but her feeble resistance was nothing against the massive coil of muscle. "Ruby! Ruby!" Chloe screamed, but her legs felt like lead. Terror had paralyzed even her maternal instincts. She wanted to burst out of the house, but the single pane of glass in the window felt like an insurmountable wall. In this scene of utter despair, only one creature was able to move. Bluey. There was no longer any fear in the old dog's amber eyes. There was only one thing, a pure, unshakable resolve to protect his family, and a burning rage towards the creature that dared to harm the descendant of his beloved late mistress. GRAWWWR. Bluey bared his teeth, the fur on his back standing up to its absolute limit. He was no longer a gentle old dog, he was the fierce working dog of his youth. He literally threw himself between the python and Ruby, blocking the snake from getting any closer. But the python merely glanced at the old dog, completely unfazed. It had no intention of letting go of the prey it had already captured. If anything, Bluey's aggression seemed to annoy it, and it began to squeeze Ruby's body even faster. A small, choked sound escaped Ruby's lips. She couldn't even cry anymore. That sound sealed Bluey's resolve. There was no more time for warnings. He had to act. Whatever happened to his old body, he had to do it. Bluey crouched low, his muscles bunching for one final fight. His gaze was locked on the python's head. Just one spot. His instincts told him where the weak point was. The next moment, Bluey's body shot forward like a brown bullet. With a burst of speed that defied his age, he leaped over the python's body that was crushing Ruby and launched himself straight at its head. Thud! A dull sound echoed as Bluey's sharp teeth sank deep into the flesh just below the python's head. But the python was not defeated. Enraged by the unexpected attack, it let out a furious hiss and whipped its massive body. A section of its tail, which had been wrapped around Ruby, lashed out like a whip and slammed into Bluey's side. Yelp! A cry of pain escaped the old dog, but he did not let go. He clamped his jaws even tighter, trying to bite deeper. And then the nightmare became reality. The python began to coil its massive body around Bluey. Crack, crunch, the sickening sound of old bones groaning under immense pressure could be heard. Bluey's breathing became ragged, choked with agony, his limbs convulsed as he was squeezed. But still, he did not let go of his grip. I have to protect her. That one thought alone kept him going. If he released his jaw, all of the snake's power would be turned back on the tiny child. He had to prevent that, no matter what. Chloe could only press her forehead against the windowpane and weep. Her beloved daughter was being killed. Her family dog, who was like a child to her, was being crushed to death right before her eyes. And she could do nothing. Could Liam and Bruce, working far away, hear her screams? No, it was probably too late. With a cold dread, Chloe realized the horrifying truth. At this rate, both Ruby and Bluey would be killed. The once peaceful, sunny afternoon had been instantly painted with the colors of blood and despair. Chloe's desperate screams, carried by the wind, barely reached the other side of the farm. At first, Bruce dismissed the faint, high-pitched noise as a bird, paying it no mind over the roar of his ride-on mower. But when the scream came a second and then a third time, he knew something was terribly wrong. He cut the engine. In the sudden silence, Chloe's frantic, hysterical cries echoed across the property. Liam, Dad, help! The blood drained from Bruce's face. Something had happened, something terrible. He threw the mower keys on the ground and ran towards the house with a speed that seemed impossible for a man his age. A speed forged by decades of hard physical labor. At almost the same moment, Liam's ute was pulling into the farm's entrance. Returning from town, with the window down, his wife's desperate screams hit him like a physical blow. Chloe, he slammed his foot on the accelerator. The tires spat gravel as the ute screeched to a halt in front of the house. He didn't even bother to turn off the engine as he tumbled out of the driver's seat. The two men arrived at the horrific scene at almost the same time. And they both froze, speechless. The sight before them was something from a nightmare. A giant snake, the snake crushing the life out of Ruby, who was starting to go limp, and Bluey, being crushed himself, but still desperately latched onto the snake's neck. Inside, behind the window, Chloe was on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Ruby, a hoarse cry escaped Liam's throat. He felt a shock so profound it was as if his blood had frozen solid. "You bloody monster!" A roar of pure rage erupted from Bruce. His eyes were bloodshot. A murderous fury burned in him towards the unknown intruder that had dared to harm his precious granddaughter and the dog that was a living memory of his late wife. Bruce roughly grabbed Liam, who was frozen in terror. "Liam, snap out of it! A weapon! Grab anything! A weapon!" That shout brought Liam back to his senses. That's right, just standing here would change nothing. He had to save them. His daughter, and Bluey. Liam sprinted to the nearby shed. The first thing he saw was an old, heavy-duty shovel leaning against the wall. He grabbed the solid weight of iron and steel. Meanwhile, Bruce pulled out the long, worn-out knife he always wore on his belt for farm work. The blade, dull like moonlight, glinted as it caught the summer sun. The father-in-law and son-in-law, who had refused to see eye to eye, now stood back to back, facing the giant snake with a single purpose. "I'll go from the right. Distract it. Dad, be careful, don't get too close." For the first time, their voices overlapped. Words of concern for each other came out naturally. But the python was in a frenzy. The pain from Bluey's bite and the appearance of new enemies had pushed its aggression to the peak. Whump! The massive tail swung like a club and slammed into the ground. The force was so immense it tore up the earth and sent grass flying. The sheer power of it made both Liam and Bruce flinch back for a second. The snake's grip on Bluey tightened even more. A pained whimper came from the old dog. Time was running out. Ruby's movements were becoming weaker. They wouldn't make it in time. In this desperate situation, the two men made their decision and charged forward at the same time. The battle began with a strike from Liam. Rah! With a primal scream, he swung the shovel with all his might. He wasn't aiming for the snake's body, a move like that could injure Ruby or Bluey. Instead, he slammed the shovel into the ground right next to the snake. Crack! The hard, dry earth shattered, sending dirt flying. Startled by the impact and the sound, the python turned its head towards Liam for a split second. It was only a fraction of a second. But Bruce, the seasoned farmer, did not miss it. He moved with the speed of an old predator, circling to the python's side. He dropped into a low stance and swung his knife in a powerful upward arc. Slash! A wet, tearing sound filled the air. Bruce's knife pierced the python's thick scales and cut a deep gash in its side. Hiss! The snake let out a horrific scream and began to thrash wildly. Its giant body convulsed with such violence it seemed to shake the very ground. Dark, thick blood poured from the wound, staining the soil. Just then, Chloe burst out of the house. In her hand, she gripped a long metal clothes prop. Though she was trembling with fear, her eyes burned with the fierce determination of a mother. "Ruby, my baby!" Sobbing, she frantically jabbed the snake's body with the end of the pole. Her attacks had little force, but the constant, annoying prodding was clearly irritating the snake, breaking its concentration. Chloe distracted it from the front. Bruce attacked with his knife from the side, and Liam created diversions with the shovel. The father, the husband, and the grandfather, a family that had been falling apart, was now united, fighting as one to save the single life that connected them all. And at the center of this desperate battle was Bluey, still enduring unimaginable pain. The snake, while tormented by the family's attacks, refused to loosen its grip on him. Bluey's consciousness was starting to fade. Bloody foam trickled from the corners of his mouth. But even in his fading awareness, his instinct was locked onto one thing, the spot on the neck where his teeth were buried. This was the only place to end the enemy's life. He summoned the very last of his strength and clamped his jaw tighter. Deeper, deeper still, to crush the bone, to sever the nerve. The family's counterattack was working. The wound Bruce had inflicted was deep, and the python's movements were becoming sluggish. Liam's intimidating feints prevented it from refocusing on Ruby. Chloe's relentless jabs were slowly draining its energy. And then, finally, the moment came. Unable to withstand the family's onslaught, the python loosened its hold on Ruby for a split second. It likely wanted to free its body to attack the enemies in front of it. That brief window of opportunity, that tiny release of pressure, the dying old dog, Bluey, did not miss it. A final, brilliant light flared in his amber eyes. "This is my chance, and it's my last." Ignoring the feeling of his own ribs cracking under the pressure, he summoned every last ounce of his being and twisted his neck, channeling his remaining life force into his jaw. It was a final, desperate act that burned up the very essence of his life. Crunch, rip, the horrific sound of muscle and sinew tearing apart echoed in the air. Bluey's teeth tore and ripped through the flesh of the python's neck. A fatal blow had been delivered to the creature's weak spot. Gah! A death cry unlike any before. The python no longer cared about Ruby or Bluey. Its massive body writhed in agony, thrashing against the ground, coiling and uncoiling in a mad frenzy. In its violent throes, the coils around Ruby completely unraveled. The pressure crushing Bluey was also gone. Now, Chloe screamed, seeing her daughter free. She forgot everything else and scrambled towards her tiny body. "Ruby, Ruby, darling, stay with me." She clutched the limp child to her chest. Thank God, she was breathing, but her face was pale, and she seemed to be only semi-conscious. Still, in her mother's arms, Ruby let out a weak cry. She was alive. That single fact was enough to make tears of relief stream down Chloe's face like a waterfall. Meanwhile, the mortally wounded python, driven by its last survival instinct, was writhing and crawling away. Its destination was the dark bushland from which it came. Liam and Bruce started to give chase, but the dying beast was thrashing so violently it was too dangerous to approach. Eventually, the python dragged itself into the thick undergrowth behind the greenhouse and disappeared. Silence returned to the battlefield. All that remained was the torn-up ground, the smell of blood, and the family, collapsing onto the ground in relief and exhaustion. "Thank God, Ruby's okay," Liam said, his voice trembling. Bruce leaned on his knife like a cane, taking deep, ragged breaths. Everyone was relieved that Ruby was safe. It was then that Chloe whispered, her voice filled with sudden dread, "Bluey." 3 pairs of eyes immediately turned to the old dog who had been at the heart of the battle. Bluey was there, but the sight was devastating. Freed from the python, he stumbled a few steps, then collapsed in a heap, utterly spent. His body was covered in dirt and blood. He lay still, not moving a muscle. Blood trickled from his mouth, forming a red puddle on the ground. "Bluey!" Liam yelled, rushing to his side. When he touched the dog's body, he could only feel a weak tremor. "Bluey, hang on, mate, it's over, you won, you won." Liam cradled Bluey's body, desperately calling his name. As if responding to his voice, Bluey's eyes fluttered open, but his amber gaze was unfocused, staring into nothingness. With his last ounce of strength, he slowly turned his head to look at Ruby, safe in Chloe's arms. A look of what seemed like peaceful relief washed over his face, as if to ask, "Is the little one all right?" And that was it. All the strength left his body. The light slowly faded from the eyes that were fixed on Ruby. A final, soft breath escaped his open mouth. No, no. In Liam's arms, Bluey's body became a dead weight. The light had completely vanished from the eyes of the blood-stained hero who had saved Ruby's life. Was Bluey's life truly over? The cost of this miracle was proving to be far too cruel. The piercing wail of a siren echoed across the farm. An ambulance, called by a panicking Chloe, had arrived. At the same time, a vehicle from the 24-hour emergency vet clinic that Liam had called in a frenzy was also on its way. Paramedics in white uniforms rushed in with a stretcher. "The baby is here, ma'am. Can you tell us what happened?" Their calm, professional manner brought a sliver of order to the chaos. Chloe, her face a mess of tears, frantically explained the situation. Ruby, with a tiny oxygen mask on her face, was carefully placed on the stretcher. "Dad, I'll go with Bluey," Liam said to Bruce. Bruce nodded firmly, his voice trembling. "I know, Chloe and I will take care of Ruby. You go with Bluey, don't you dare let him die." The ambulance, carrying Ruby, Chloe, and Bruce, sped away down the gravel road. As it disappeared, the vet's van pulled up. A young female vet jumped out. "Oh my God," she gasped when she saw Bluey's blood-soaked, motionless body. She listened with a stethoscope, checked his pupils, and quickly examined his body. Multiple broken ribs, high chance of internal injuries. "We need to get him into surgery immediately or he won't make it." Together with the vet, Liam carefully carried Bluey's limp body into the van. As the vet administered emergency first aid, all Liam could do was stroke Bluey's body, which was starting to feel cold, and pray. "Don't die, Bluey. Ruby will be devastated if you're gone." His voice was a hollow whisper, lost in the confines of the van. Two lives were now hovering on the brink of death, in two separate places. At the regional hospital's emergency room, Ruby was undergoing a battery of tests. In the waiting area, Bruce and Chloe waited, holding their breath. Chloe, pale and shaken, wrung her hands. Bruce leaned against the wall with his eyes closed, but his tightly clenched fists betrayed the violent turmoil within him. After what felt like an eternity, the door to the treatment room opened and a doctor with a grim expression emerged. She was very lucky. A few more minutes and it would have been complete asphyxiation. "Thankfully, there are no broken bones, but we'll need to keep her in the ICU overnight to monitor for any effects from the crushing and temporary lack of oxygen." At the doctor's words, Chloe's knees buckled and she nearly collapsed. Bruce caught her, his own hand shaking. Her life had been saved, but it was a miracle of the narrowest margin. Bruce thought of the snake, of his granddaughter's small hand, and a shudder ran through his entire body. Miles away, at the animal hospital, a desperate battle was being waged to save Bluey's life. Liam paced back and forth in front of the operating theater, praying. Through the glass panel, he could see the green-scrubbed staff moving quickly. A crushing sense of his own helplessness overwhelmed him. If only he'd noticed Bluey's warnings sooner. If only he and Chloe hadn't been so at odds with Bruce. Regrets washed over him, one after another. Hours felt like days. Finally, the operating theater's light went off, and the vet emerged, her face etched with exhaustion. Liam rushed towards her. "Doctor, is Bluey?" The vet slowly shook her head. "We've done everything we can. We've stopped the bleeding, but he's in a state of shock. The internal damage is severe." She looked Liam straight in the eye and delivered the brutal news. "He's in critical condition. Honestly, tonight will be the decider. It's touch and go." Her words were like a cold steel hammer, shattering his last glimmer of hope. The vet's grim prognosis left Liam collapsing into a chair in the waiting room. "Tonight will be the decider." The words echoed in his head. Through the glass wall of the ICU, he could see Bluey's still form, connected to a dozen tubes. The hero who had saved Ruby was now fighting for his life. All alone. "This is my fault. If I had just paid more attention." Liam buried his face in his hands, trying to choke back the sobs that threatened to overwhelm him. Just then, the waiting room door opened quietly, and a familiar figure walked in. It was Bruce. He must have taken a taxi from the hospital where Ruby was. His face was a mask of deep exhaustion and sorrow. Bruce said nothing, simply sitting down next to Liam. A heavy silence hung between them. It was Bruce who spoke first. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice a choked whisper. When Liam looked up, Bruce was bowing his head low, his weathered, calloused hands clenched tightly on his knees. I was wrong. I wouldn't listen to a word Chloe said. I ignored Bluey's warnings. My stubborn pride, it put Ruby and Bluey in this mess." His voice was trembling, broken. Liam was speechless. This proud, stubborn old farmer, apologizing to him? To Chloe, Through him? He couldn't believe it. Bruce finally lifted his head. Tears were streaming down his face. It was the first time Liam had ever seen the man who had single-handedly worked this farm for 30 years cry. When I thought we might lose Ruby, I felt like I was dead inside. And Bluey, he saved her. He saved her with his own life. He's not just a dog. He's our family. He's a bloody hero. Bruce then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a worn old bank passbook. He pushed it into Liam's hands. Use this to pay for the treatment. I don't care how much it costs. Use all of it. This is what it's for. It was the money Bruce had saved over a lifetime of sweat and toil. It was his entire life. Liam remembered the hefty estimate the vet had given him before the surgery and felt a pang of shame for his own momentary hesitation. Dad. Just take it, son. It's the least I can do. With a trembling hand, Liam took the passbook. It felt heavy. It wasn't just the weight of paper. It was the weight of Bruce's regret, his gratitude to Bluey, and his apology to Chloe and him. Liam felt the high, thick wall of ice that had stood between them finally crack and begin to melt away. Your wife's plan, Bruce said suddenly. Tell me about it again. That internet thing. This time, I'll listen properly. I'll help. Just please, save Bluey. The last words were unspoken, but they reached Liam's heart loud and clear. It was the moment Bruce finally acknowledged Chloe not as an outsider, but as family, as the person he would entrust the future of the farm to. At that exact moment, Liam's mobile phone rang, shattering the silence of the waiting room. The caller ID read, "Emergency Vet Clinic." A wave of tension passed between the two men. Oh God, no. Liam fearfully pressed the answer button. Hello? Mr. Mitchell? It's about Bluey in the ICU. His condition has just changed suddenly. The vet's urgent voice stabbed at his eardrums. Liam and Bruce locked eyes. Their faces pale. The worst-case scenario flashed through both their minds. But the vet's call wasn't a message of despair. It was the excited announcement of a miracle. It's unbelievable. His heart stopped for a moment. But he's come back. His vitals are stabilizing. It took a few seconds for Liam and Bruce to process the words. He had pulled through. Bluey, with his own life force, had clawed his way back from the brink of death. The two men stared through the glass into the ICU. On the monitor, the waveform of the electrocardiogram was moving with a strong, steady rhythm. The vets inside were looking at each other with expressions of disbelief and relief. A week later, a semblance of normalcy began to return to the farm. First, Ruby came home from the hospital. Miraculously, she had no lasting injuries and was back to her cheerful, energetic self, as if her hospital stay had never happened. The only thing that had changed was that as soon as she got home, she started toddling around the house, calling out one of her first clear words, Bluey, Bluey. Then, 3 days after Ruby's return, the hero himself came home. The sight of Bluey slowly getting out of Liam's car was heartbreaking. His body was covered in angry-looking surgical scars, and his side was wrapped in bandages. He walked with a stiff, pained gait, but the definite light of life had returned to his amber eyes. Bluey, the moment she saw him, Ruby ran towards him as fast as her little legs could carry her. She gently, so gently, wrapped her arms around his still sore body. Thank you, Bluey. The words were clumsy, but clear. The 1.5-year-old girl knew, with absolute certainty, who her savior was. Watching the scene, Chloe, Liam, and Bruce all felt tears stream down their faces. As if he understood her words, Bluey gave Ruby's small cheek one soft, gentle lick. It was an exchange of gratitude and love that needed no words. Peaceful days finally returned. Bluey wasn't fully recovered, but he showed a remarkable resilience. And his favorite spot was, as always, right by Ruby's side. When she played in the garden, he would lie quietly nearby. When she napped, he would curl up at her feet. He never let her out of his sight. The family's dynamic had also changed dramatically since the incident. Bruce no longer called Chloe a city Sheila. Every morning, the two of them would head out to the fields together. Bruce would teach Chloe his decades of hands-on experience, and Chloe would share her new knowledge and ideas. They looked like a real father and daughter, working together. Chloe, these tomatoes are the best they've ever been. Sugar content is perfect. Bruce, based on this data, we can start harvesting this section next week. The new packaging design is getting great reviews online. By the way, this kind of conversation became their new normal. Liam watched them from the porch, holding Ruby, a heartfelt smile on his face. The suffocating tension of those early days felt like a lifetime ago. Soon, a new change came to the farm. Neighboring farmers began to visit the Patterson's patch. Among them was Kev, the man who had first warned Bruce about the snake. Bruce, Chloe, we've got a favor to ask. Could you sell our produce on your website? Like Bruce, they were all struggling to find buyers, battling with corporations, and worrying about who would take over their farms. The miraculous turnaround of the Pattersons' farm was a beacon of hope for them. Bruce looked at Chloe. Chloe nodded with determination. Let's do it, Bruce. Let's make our platform a source of hope for this whole region. Chloe rebranded the platform as the Yarra Valley Harvest Co-op. It evolved from just selling their own tomatoes to a community marketplace featuring Kev's kiwis, another farmer's organic rice, and another's artisan honey. Chloe carefully interviewed each farmer, telling their stories on the website. The grumpy farmer's delicious apples, 3 generations of organic goodness. This storytelling approach captured the hearts of consumers. The products became recognized as premium brands with real value, allowing them to generate stable profits without getting caught in price wars. Bruce, the man who had once scoffed at Chloe's plan as a fairy tale, was now its biggest advocate, telling other farmers, "You can't go wrong if you listen to what Chloe says." The farm's V-shaped recovery and its contribution to the community did not go unnoticed. One afternoon, several black government cars pulled up at the farm. Out stepped officials from the Department of Agriculture. "Ms. Chloe Mitchell, the regional platform you've developed, combining traditional farming with IT, is a fantastic model for the future of Australian agriculture." The official said this and handed Chloe an envelope. Inside was a letter containing an unbelievable announcement. Their farm and the co-op platform had been designated as a national next-generation farming model and would receive full government support for its future activities. Bruce just stared at the piece of paper, stunned. A small, struggling farm that had been on the verge of bankruptcy was now a national model case. It was the final chapter in the miracle that Bluey had started. The seasons turned, the brutal heat of summer softened, and the crisp air of autumn filled the valley. The golden evening sun cast a gentle glow over the harvested tomato fields. Bluey, Ruby, now chattering away and running confidently, called out happily as she chased the old dog. Bluey's wounds had healed, and he had regained his former strength. He played along with Ruby's game, running deliberately slowly, looking back every now and then with a wag of his tail. Chloe, Liam, and Bruce sat on the veranda, watching the scene with calm smiles. "We grew some bloody good tomatoes this year, eh, Bruce?" Liam said thoughtfully, holding up a perfectly ripe red tomato. Bruce glanced at Liam and nodded deeply. "Yeah, thanks to you too, and to Bluey." There was no longer any hardness in his voice, only deep trust and gratitude. A year had passed since the frenzy. The Yarra Valley Harvest Co-op was now on a path of steady growth. With a loyal following across the country, the number of participating farms had grown to over 20. Chloe was no longer the city Sheila, but a respected young leader driving the region's agriculture. But the family's life hadn't changed all that much. They still lived on this land, with the rhythm of the earth. The only fundamental difference was the warmth that now flowed between them. Chloe watched her husband and her father, and whispered silently in her heart, "Thank you, Bluey." The miracle Bluey had brought them wasn't money or fame. It was the bond of a family, once broken, now reforged stronger than ever before. The sun began to dip below the hills, painting the sky in fiery oranges and deep indigos. Tired of their game, Ruby wrapped her arms tightly around Bluey's neck. "Love you, Bluey." Bluey responded by gently licking her cheek. The scene was as perfect and fulfilling as a painting. Chloe leaned back in her chair and spoke quietly to her father sitting beside her. "Dad, I'm so glad I came here." Bruce didn't say anything. He just reached over and patted her shoulder once with his rough hand. No more words were needed. They had overcome their differences, their struggles, and had become a true family. Ruby's clear laughter and the proud profile of Bluey, the loyal old dog, melted into the twilight of the farm. It was the story of a family's rebirth from the depths of despair. And it was the warm, gentle conclusion to a story of love and miracles. A story of a hero who fought for his family with every fiber of his being.